Not a problem. So, let's see. All right. Well, I'm Jamie Konorski Davidson. I'm a Lensbaby trailblazer. I am based in Greenville, North Carolina, which is nowhere near the mountains. It's the flatlands, no hills, nor valleys or mountains or anything. But I am about an hour and 15 minutes from the closest part of the coast. So um, that's that's a plus. And I've been a Lensbaby user for probably, well over 20 years into the film days. And I just love Lensbaby. And there's always at least one, two, or three in my bag when I go out to shoot. So I am here to share my screen and talk about getting creative with Lensbaby. And you're going to see a lot of images here. I'm not, if you have a question, please feel free to jump in and ask. A lot of the images, all of the images, unless it's really obvious, are Lensbaby images. If not, I will tell you, but there's also captions on a lot of them that tell you what lens or optic I've used. So, just to get started, I go way back into the film days, for me anyway. And Galen Rowell was a photographer that was an adventure photographer. And what he said was, at the heart of all photography is an urge to express our deepest personal feelings, to reveal our inner hidden selves, and to unlock the artist. And I think for me, my experience with Lensbaby really allows me to connect with that inner artist more than probably any other lens or attachment that I have in my bag. And so Lensbaby started in 2004 at WPPI, and you can see from the dates that every so many years something new came out, and then sometimes it was every year. I actually started with the Lensbaby 2.0, and that was in 2005. So yeah, that's a little over 20 years that I've been connected with, not officially, but that I started with Lensbaby and just kept going with it. So this is just the beginning part, and way more I'm hoping to come in the future. So for those of you who don't know what Lensbabies are, the best way to describe them are creative effect lenses, optics, and or accessories that allow you to see and photograph in new ways. They are all manual focus. There are no electronic connections to your camera. So when you look at your metadata, when you download files, you'll never know what aperture you used unless you feel that it's really important for you to establish a system and you stick with it to record the apertures. I will say that I usually am shooting in the wider aperture range, and typically on all of these, the wider apertures give you the most effect, and the smaller apertures from sometimes 5.6 and up, you start to lose the effect and they become general lenses. You do get to see your ISO and shutter speed. If you have more than one Lensbaby, I would suggest, and I have a system that I most of the time use to know what Lensbaby I've used, and I'll show you that. But some cameras need to be set with shoot or release without a lens. Canon sometimes falls in that category, but not every Canon, just like not any brand is exactly the same. But for me, the Lensbabies are the perfect tool for embracing imperfection. So we're not going for perfect, we're going for creative. For me, I'm going for the artistic and connecting on that level, and emotionally, just looking through the viewfinder and seeing something and just kind of responding to it. But this right here is the Lensbaby 2.0. And so yeah, we are at 20 years. And I always refer to it as the squeeze box, because when you put it on your camera, you basically squeezed that. You can see that it's kind of like an accordion. You squeeze it or you push it one side or the other, or sometimes to get focus on a particular part of a subject, you pushed it out. It came with aperture rings, so you had to drop those in. And to get them out, you used this tip here, a magnetic piece that helped you pull the aperture rings out if you didn't have long enough fingernails. And they lived in this little cap here. So that's where I started with Lensbaby. And this picture was taken quite a number of years ago, actually, because my collection has grown. But this was part of my collection. You can see a collection of optics and the old system with the optics here. This is newer. These are lenses. So I have accumulated an awful lot of Lensbabies. Don't use all of them all the time, but I always have a Lensbaby in my bag. So this is where these two images were taken. The one on the left was taken with the soft focus optic. And what I love about the soft focus optic in particular is that if you've got a busy background, it just creates this veil of texture. You still can get focus on things. And my tendency is to go close. So they come with close-up filters. And I'll oftentimes use all of them. I stack the little filters one on top of the other to get close, like with the Morning Glory. This is an example of the Lensbaby 2.0. You can see where on the top of the one on the left, I squeezed in one direction and it sort of stretched the plant, the flower there. And you don't have to use them all on flowers, but flowers are my favorite subject. But buildings, barns, you name it, and you can use it. But you can also see here where the stretching occurs just from squeezing and pushing. So that's where I started. The soft focus optic is what I really kind of fell in love with, because it gives that dreamy effect right immediately. And with Lensbaby, all of them really, you can see the effect as you look through the viewfinder. So that's also what I love. And this kind of effect, you don't have to do a whole lot of post-processing. If you've got your exposure, in a good place and everything else is working for you, you do not have to, do reconstructive surgery on any of your images with Lensbaby. Obviously, if you're shooting in RAW, you're going to do the things that you would normally do. But the idea is to look through the viewfinder and capture images that just speak to you. And so here's a family of Indian blanket flowers. And this was probably the soft focus optic also. And this is the same soft focus optic with the macro filter stacked. So two different perspectives and views. Most of the time what you'll see is sort of a blur around the edges, and that's just the nature of whatever optic or filter you're using. Just a word of advice, if any of you have a Lensbaby composer and you have the soft focus optic and you're going out in the wild, the woods, where there's a potential for you to encounter a bear, for example, this was in the Smokies. At the time I had one camera, and so I chose to be creative in the Smokies, and I'm on the edge of a stream, and all of a sudden there was a bear across the stream. And here it is. So that's my bear in the Smokies. I could not change my lens fast enough because there was a fisherman in the stream just down to the right, and the bear was kind of coming in his direction. So we did a whole lot of screaming and pointing. And once the fisherman saw the bear, he left. We never saw him, not even for a thank you so much. So we'll just leave it at that. But you know, if you're going to get creative, pick and choose where. If you've got the potential to encounter wildlife, you might want to rethink soft focus optic in particular. For me, in general, photography is a balancing act. You know, on one hand, we have the need to be technically correct. But I think a lot of times, if we just focus on technically correct, then we miss out on expanding and moving toward the direction of being creative and exercising our own seeing and creative vision. So for me, Lensbaby tells me that, okay, I need to be correct in the areas that need, you know, the common attention, composition and things like that. But in terms of what's in focus, that's a whole nother ball of wax. And so on this scale here, the seesaw, the creative vision would be down much lower than technically correct. And I find that freeing. On the same similar ideas, you know, there are times when we're uninspired and unmotivated, we're not seeing anything. And what I have found, my personal experience, is that when I stick a Lensbaby on my camera and start looking through it and looking at ordinary things, all of a sudden things change and I become inspired and motivated. So that's another reason why I love Lensbabies, is because they do help me see differently. And I started, you know, with macro lens. And all people knew of me is that, oh, you shoot macro and flowers, and that was all. And I'm like, no, I shoot more, but that's a passion. This slide here is an image made with a Velvet 56 in an old church, and with the an organ that has pulls for the sounds. And I'm looking at it, and we had a lady with us who could play the organ. So she started playing and pumping and the whole 9 yards. And I was fascinated by the names of the keys. And I saw perfection and I thought, oh, yay. What does it sound like? She pulled it and she said, perfection is broken. And I think that that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to stick in your head. Get away from the idea of needing everything to be just so and perfect. For me, perfect is it's not a real thing. A goal, I think, that's better is to do your best. Go in the best direction versus perfect. Perfect has a tendency to hold you back. When I was growing up, my father said, do it right or don't do it at all. Well, that created a perfectionist, and it's taken a while to get past perfect. And somebody said, you know, if you just do your best, that's great, because your best changes and there's always room for incremental improvement. And so I think that's what my father was meaning to say, but what I heard was, you know, don't do it at all if you're not going to do it perfectly. So I love that Lensbaby is not about being perfect. So I look for broken things, for things that are not just so, like this. And you see at the bottom, this was Velvet 28. But I look for these. And this concept here of what you're seeing is a good example of wabi-sabi, embracing the beauty and finding the beauty of imperfection, impermanence. And oh, there's one other eye that I just can't think of right now. But broken mirror, I don't know what optic I had on there. Does it matter? No, I was just playing. And that's the other thing that Lensbaby helps me to do, is to play, because I can let go of that idea of everything being just so. So all different subjects. And here you go on the slide, let go of perfect. From the standpoint of practical tips, the one thing I would say is that the Lensbabies now allow you to choose with a few exceptions, like the Sol 45 and the Sweet 22. Anyway, most of them allow you to choose an aperture. And the hardest thing probably to get used to initially is finding an edge of focus. So if you're starting wide open, depending on which lens or optic you have, it can be very, very hard because the effect is amplified at the wide angles. So my suggestion is to start around f4, find your edge and kind of get comfortable there, and then change to wider as you want or need to. You do want to pay attention to your focus point and the edge. But if you're going into the abstract direction, you know, that's all relative. Sometimes the tripod makes it easier for you to get used to a particular lens or optic. Other times it holds you back. So I kind of do a mix of both hand holding and using a tripod. For anyone who does hand hold and hates a tripod, I understand, but sometimes the tripod is your best friend. But if you want to get into these odd positions and you're going with the flow, then hand holding is best. Just make sure your shutter speed is what it needs to be to get hit with Lensbaby, sharp enough images, and just keep playing. So I'm one of those people who see things beyond what it is. And I love aging, dying, dead, dried up, anything. So I forget what flower this is, but what I saw when I looked through the lens is a dancer, you know, taking a bow. So the background is just what's behind there. Some backgrounds are on my back patio, and they're, oops, I don't know what that is. I'm gonna get this together here. But Lensbaby can really help you with backgrounds, just to sort of be a blend of colors and not so much identifiable things. So in terms of your own rules, just in general, you know, look for key elements, look for the thing that is drawing you in, keep your compositions simple. By doing that, you can create interesting ones. And if you've got the composer, you know that you can bend and tilt. If you bend or tilt too far, what you'll see on one side of your image is dark vignette. It's not a vignette, it's actually the optic. So if you go too far, just back it off. If you can't focus, you either need to move back or add some close-up accessories. Every one of these lenses and optics have a different minimum focusing distance. So if you want to get in close, get your macro filters, use an extension tube, do whatever you need to do. I'm always stacking macro filters, and I typically don't use the extension tube simply because I like to be more fluid. And so I'd rather screw on and off a filter than take the extension tube on and off and expose, not the end of the world, you know, if you've got a dirty sensor, but I'd rather not invite schmutz on my sensor if I can help it. And just be ready for surprises. So this is down in White, Georgia, Old Car City, and this, I believe, is the Sol 44. So it's not just for flowers. This is inside a fishing, basically a one-house fishing museum, and these are the tools of the trade that go back a long way. So that selective focus is really something that I love about all of the Lensbabies. My favorite, honestly, is the Velvet 56 because it offers an overall glow, and you can get really close to subjects, so you've got flexibility there. I don't have to add anything, although I do, in terms of getting closer. You can get really creative. This is in an antique store, and it's a paper umbrella just looking down. But again, Velvet 56. The Sweet 80, the sweets, I'll get into this a little bit more, but they have a sweet spot in the center that you can move left, right, up, down to wherever you want in the frame. So a sweet spot in the center, and then blur around the edges. And the size of the blur changes according to the aperture that you choose. The look of Lensbaby is untraditional. So if you are someone who likes things to be just so, it's probably good practice for you to have a Lensbaby and go, okay, I'm going to get out of my box, because that's what Lensbaby does. It gets you out of the box. Each one of the Lensbabies have a different effect and look. And the soft focus, as you've seen, is great for ethereal and just overall softness. The sweet spots, as I've mentioned, are movable and they're circular. The edge optics are slices of focus versus circles, and they too are movable. So that's what the Composer Pro. The Composer Pro is a holder, not anything but an empty. It's kind of like having a brain vacation moment. Extension tubes. There's no glass in it, right? It's just an empty hole, and so the composers are like that. The Lensbabies are classified in their effects. So you've got a sweet spot, and you can see all that are listed there. I don't have the Sweet 22 in that list, but that's another one. It's very small and pancake-like. The edges, the swirls, the twist, and it has a swirly bokeh and effect. The velvets are an overall glow, and the soft focus is very much impressionistic. And you'll see those. Let's see how far I can go. There you go. So if you're looking to have options for an artistic look and mood in your images, even if you photograph people, which I don't, people are not therapeutic for me in terms of photographing, because they care what they look like. I care what I look like. And I know if somebody photographed me, I would want to look the way I want to. And so I just am not a people photographer, but a lot of photographers use Lensbaby for portraits and things like that, and to very well. So if you love photographing people, that's another possibility, to create a different look in camera. You do have to be manual focus and make sure that your diopter is adjusted for your eyesight, because if it's not, then finding an edge is not going to be very easy. But it's really about going in the interpretive zone versus literal. And these are some of the things that Lensbaby offers me. I'm free to interpret the way I want. Very simple, gets me creative in a creative zone. Because I play, I discover things. Sometimes I have very mindful moments. Not always, but it happens, if I get in the zone with a particular subject. And it's just fun. And the beauty of it is minimal post-processing. Here's an example. So this is the Sweet 35. I had macro filters on. I'm shooting, this is Fleabane, I believe. And I just pushed it in, put the macro filters on. This is unedited other than to be converted to a JPEG. So if that, is appealing to you, that's, I could stop here. I could edit, I could sharpen a few edges if I wanted, but that's what I'm looking at through the viewfinder. So I find that to be very, very enjoyable. You can shoot in manual. I shoot Lensbabies and most often in aperture priority, because the camera responds to it. It makes it a lot easier for me if I'm shooting in aperture priority, and I can just adjust the shutter speed with exposure comp. Again, I mentioned to start at f4 to focus and then go from there. With the optics, if you're new to the optics, forget about bending at the beginning. Lock the optic in place straight ahead and get used to the idea of how it works. What you can get with it, what effect, how close do you need to be, how far do you need to add macro filters. And once you're more comfortable with that, then start twisting and tilting and all of that. It's very easy to get frustrated because it's not a normal lens. None of these are, quote, normal. They're all unique and different. But one of the things is like, well, if you have more than one Lensbaby, how do you know what you've used? Well, this is a system. One system that a friend of mine had was that she would write what the optic was and take a picture of it before she started shooting. And I said, well, I have too many to be marking up things. So I developed my stick system. And you can see, the velvets, the sweets, the sol, etc. And sometimes if I used a Raynox or a close-up filter, I might hold the two sticks up and photograph them. And anything past the stick is what I used. Now, if I forget to, or if my sticks are in the bag, then sometimes I come up with a different system. Or if I have the sticks and I forgot to take the initial picture, then at the end of my series, when I'm switching, I'll take a picture of the particular stick and I'll put my finger in it and point in the opposite direction, saying anything that way was this thing. And this is kind of what it would look like. So that's a way to keep track of what you're using, because a lot of times, unless you're familiar with the particular effects and remember what you used at the time, it can be challenging to understand or remember which one you used. As I said, start with the composer straight ahead with whatever optic, and then practice your tilting and bending. If you have a tendency to want to get closer, you're gonna want to get macro filters because there's just no getting around it. I photograph small things, flowers especially, and I want to get into the center, and none of them allow me to get close enough except maybe the Velvet 56 and the 28. Everything else I need to add macro filters or some type of accessory to get closer. But the optic swap system, which I'll just start with, what's in the center, that's the composer, that's the holder. And these are some of the optics, and they just pop in, you lock them. And if you notice on this Sweet 80, you can see that you can choose the aperture. So that's what allows you to get more or less of the effect. The Sweet 80 has sort of like this built-in extension tube. You can pull it and get a teeny bit closer, but for from the way I use it, I'm still adding more close-up stuff. Early optics are like this. You've already seen the soft focus optic was the one that really sort of drew me in. The others I have, and I've used the fisheye, but most of the early ones I didn't use because I found my favorite. I think the latest version of the Composer is the Composer Pro 2. It mounts to a variety of lenses, cameras. So right now, Sony, Canon, Nikon, and I'm not clear about what they're doing with micro four thirds, Olympus, etc. But if you use one of those systems, then you can contact Lensbaby and see if they can help you out. But these are just a list of the optics that are available. So the sweets, the edge, the twist, creative focus, soft focus, 2, meaning that you can control the aperture. So there's just a lot of options. And here's, my new old favorite, soft focus 2. And in this case, I probably was not using a macro filter, but I could have been. I forget how tiny or large those leaves were. But it's a look that is different. If you do creative photography and you use textures, you can use these to create textures just by defocusing. So I'll do that sometimes, and I'll print the images on matte paper and mount them to foam core, and I'm able to do work inside. But these are all soft focus 2 images. And yes, I had macro filters on for the dandelion, but the spark is an odd thing. It's kind of like the Lensbaby 2.0 that I started with, but you can switch optics, and so it still has that squeeze and squish ability. I don't use that very often, but it's available for me. Edward Weston said, when subject matter is forced to fit in preconceived patterns, there can be no freshness of vision. You probably get tired of hearing me say this, but Lensbaby offers that freshness of vision, and that's why I love it so much. In terms of accessories to get close, the macro filter set on the right-hand side is what I use, because it's +1, +2, +4. And sometimes I'll just start right at 4 because I know that I want to get closer. Other times I'll kind of graduate into the stacking all of them. The macro converters, I haven't used. I have them, but one time I got it stuck on my lens and I had to have somebody help me get it off. So the filters are easier. And then also it's the same thing if you're using an extension tube. You have it until you remove it. So I like the flexibility. In terms of what I use as an accessory with any of the Lensbabies, the Canon 500D close-up lens, again, a screw-on, but a good and sharp one, good quality. The Nikon 6T, you actually can still get these like on eBay or whatever, but Nikon hasn't made these in probably decades. But they're 62 millimeters and they fit perfectly on my Velvet 56, so I just keep collecting them. The Raynox 150 and 250 is sort of a snap-on thing in the front. You see it down on this bottom right. And it also allows you to get close. The magnification, I can't give you specifics, but you actually have to move even closer than with these other close-up filters. I am a big proponent of circular polarizer. And so I have them on all of my velvets, and I find that they make a huge difference. The optics, I have a circular polarizer that I can rotate around because it's all the same filter size. Sometimes I put it on, other times not, depending on the subject. Controlling the light, I'm sure you're all familiar with diffusers and reflectors. Using a small flashlight if you want to light a particular area. I've talked about the tripod, and shutter release cable or wireless is sometimes helpful. If you're hand holding, it doesn't matter. Okay. In terms of the lenses, these are the lenses. So Velvet, Sol 45 and 22. The 22 is for your smaller sensors. The Sweet 22 is a lens. It's very small and 22 millimeters. The numbers relate to the millimeters. The Twist, the Trio has 3-in-1. I don't have that. And the Obscura is one that It's very specialized. So pinhole and zone plate, and you can see the apertures 22, 45, and f90. You typically need to have a good amount of light or be on a tripod for that. And I have not experimented with it because I just haven't. It's probably on my list. In terms of the velvets, these are the three: 28 millimeters, 56, and 85. A lot of people who photograph flowers love the 85 for the compression, for the narrower angle of view. My favorite probably will continue to be the 56, but I've started using the 85 a little bit more, and there definitely is a place for that. But these are lenses, and they are metal, and they are heavy. The Velvet 28 is a unique lens because you can use it for a landscape. If you're at f8, 11, 16, it's just a sharp prime lens. But you can also get 2 inches from your subject. So that's where it offers some flexibility. And if you were going to experiment, that's a lens that gives you flexibility without adding a close-up lens. But all of these are about the glow, and you've seen some of that already. I really didn't think that I, quote, needed the Velvet 28. But once a friend of mine who had it said, "Do you want to try it?" I went out to her front yard, and I filled the frame. There's no cropping, there's no nothing. I was like, this is you know how big zinnias are. They're not that big. And to get this image, I was like, okay. So I added that to my collection. But you can use it for all kinds of things. And these are some of the effects is the glow. So you can create eerie as well as ethereal and moody and dreamy. Here I'm roughly 2 inches from a dried fern on a trail. Lots of other people walked by it. Here, this is a purple gentian, actually that is near where I live. But that's the Velvet 28, and you wouldn't think that a 28 millimeter would allow you to do this, but this particular lens does. So it does have a place in my bag, even if it's the roller bag. Velvet 56 millimeters, the same thing. The wider the aperture, the stronger the glow, and it's across the frame. Handheld or tripod, typically I'm using just hand holding. Multiple exposures, you can just do anything that your camera allows you to do in the field, you can do. So this is just hydrangea, rotating multiple exposure. This is just straight into a patch of red clover, and what you can see around the edges is part of the effect, that sort of swirl around the edges. But at a wide aperture, you've also got the glow. And this is why I love the Velvet 56, because I'm seeing that through the viewfinder. So I'm not having to do all kinds of extra work in the field or on the computer. And I just dig in. I quickly add a close-up filter if I need it. And the Velvet 56, all different things that you can photograph with the velvets, including mushrooms. And you definitely, tripod is very not practical when you're photographing mushrooms on the ground. But here you can see that I maybe used 2.8 and got the edge and some detail and focus. I added the Nikon 6T, and you can see I still was able to get some edge of focus here. If I had had more time and more patience in this particular situation, I was scouting for a workshop that I was doing, so I was limited in time. But this is an example of just what happens when you add a filter, a close-up filter. And you just want to pay attention to getting an edge of focus. Doesn't have to be everything. And in here, This is a very small, I think I'm photographing this at f1.6, so it's very hard to get focus. And so it's really a little teeny tiny point on that one acorn on the left. And it's what I saw, it's what I wanted, it's exactly the look and feel that I was going for. So very flexible. Here's some Velvet 85s inside my living room, adding a texture. This is out in the field. I love shallow depth of field and selective focus. Here, you can probably tell I did not have a circular polarizer on, or my leaves would not be so shiny in the back. But I still have that edge of focus and the softness. So sometimes it really matters with the polarizer, and other times I think you can get away with not having it, but shame on me since I have a soapbox that I stand on with the polarizer. With your suites, remember they all fit in the Composer Pro, and all of the numbers represent focal lengths. And the effect, again, is a sweet spot with focus blur around it. The blur is bigger or smaller depending on the aperture that you choose. The Sweet 22 is, I think I used macro filters here just because it's very common for me to do that. But you can see the sharp center and the very beautiful blur around the edges. But it's not all about flowers. So if you walk around a thrift store or antique shop, you know, with the Sweet 22, it's very unpretentious. You know, nobody would say, oh gosh, you know, you're doing professional photos or whatever and get worried. I usually ask if I'm photographing indoors, but you can photograph anything. This is a very small nest I have in my office, and eggs that were abandoned. And this is the Sweet 22 in my office. And this is milkweed fluff. So you can really photograph anything, and probably most of those had a macro filter of some kind on it. Here's an example of what happens when you tilt the optic, the Composer Pro, to move your sweet spot. So you can see that the peony is in sharp focus, the center is in sharp focus to the left side of the frame, and everything else becomes soft and for me, soft and beautiful. The Sweet 35 in my living room with the macro filters and a printed background. I collect bottles, so I'm usually doing something inside with still lifes and florals and bottles. This is all the Sweet 35. You can tell which ones I've used macro filters. This is out in the field with a rose bush, and I'm just moving the sweet spot. Again, an example of how you can just kind of defocus and create textures with any of them. Sweet 50 millimeters, the same effect, different subjects. This one here, I will grant you, is probably a little bit disturbing because it's a little bit too, it makes me dizzy. I probably should change it out, but you know, it's an example of when you've got a lot of stuff going on that sometimes it's not going to be the right choice. So I'll probably keep it, but this is not my favorite image with the Sweet 50. Adding macro filters, get on the ground, back patio with some macro filters, the calla lily. All the color and whatnot in the back of this image in particular is just stuff that I have in my back patio from signs and pots and whatnot. So it just makes the background quite colorful and super easy to manage. This is shooting through weeds, and the sun is coming from the backside. The Sweet 80, this is in an antique store, some wood planers. And this is an example. you know, the sweets are not supposed to be sharp. So if you're at the smallest aperture, you're still going to have effect, which you can see on the top and the bottom in particular. So that's at its smallest aperture, and the other is at its widest, with the focus on the bamboo uh, in the on the left side of the frame. But here are some examples of the Sweet 80. And then adding, using topaz impression or texture, one of them. Anyway, adding another element to it. Here's the Sweet 80, and of course, just changing the aperture, adding macro filters, and pulling out the clutch portion that allows me to get closer. The edges, I'll be honest, the edge is not my favorite of the optics. I haven't quite gotten the hang of when it works best for the things that I shoot. A lot of photographers that I know use it for people, for architecture and things like that. But it's just not been, it's one of my challenges, but I try. And so this is part of it. So it's a slice of focus. And again, you can move it around. So these are some of my attempts, and I will say that they're not, if you try and I'm not sure that I really like this, it's okay. Just keep trying, and I need to do that. Again, I need to pull out my edges and get a little better. But I walked around a neighboring town, and I played with the Edge 80 because, again, I'm telling myself, well, I'm not really good at the Edge 80. So here's where I found a slice of focus that works. So again, not every subject will work, but here's examples of the Edge 80 that I tried recently. And so you can see where I moved the edge from one side to the other. And in the first one, you can see that the chain is not in sharp focus, and Come On In is more sharp. And then in the other, I moved it the optic a little bit, and it's a different effect, particularly seen on the chain. Here again, Edge 80. And I'm just shifting from the brick to the window. And my friend, Mary Doherty, she has mastered the Edge 80, and she's a super creative, very talented photographer. And I asked her, I said, can I borrow this image because it's so beautiful? And really, like, this is another way to emphasize just a little slice of focus. So that's her take on it. The twist gives you a swirly, twisty kind of bokeh, and it comes in the form of a straight where it doesn't tilt or twist. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of that. Like, I like twisting and tilting and, moving my sweet spot. So I use my twist, which I hadn't used in a while. So I pulled that out and exercised with that. But this is the effect, that swirly, twisty bokeh. And you can see it through the viewfinder, sometimes very obvious, other times a bit more subtle. And, it's just a different way of interpreting a subject. I did a one-on-one recently last month, and the lady I was working with, I said, what Lensbabies do you have, and which one have you used the least? She said, the twist. I said, oh, good, because that's one that I have used the least also. And so we sat and played around with the twist, and I actually like it a lot more than when I first tried it. So you got to give it time. So on the left is Spanish bluebells. And so you can see what happened to the bluebells that are in the background, the swirl. I did the same setup with the columbine, and this is a columbine that kind of has multiple columbines on on one stalk. And it didn't work as well in terms of swirly, but I still like it. So the idea is not to always expect an obvious swirl. In fact, when you're really close to an anemone, you're not going to see it, especially if you don't have anything in the background. So it's not like, oh, this is just for swirly. No, it's not. You just make use of what you have in front of you. And I definitely was stacking macro filters for these couple of shots. The Sol 22 and 45, you can see it's a very tiny lens. It's, super small. And the thing that makes it a little bit different, number one, is it's f3.5. So if you use the Sol, it's not going to tell you that the aperture was 3.5. But if that's what you were using for a section of time, you will know that that's your aperture because it's fixed. It also has these little blades that you can move out of the way for a very soft background, or you can move one of the blades in front or both of them. And you probably can't exactly tell, but you can rotate the direction of the effect. So you can go with soft and creamy or textured. This is a magnolia without the blades engaged and with. And you can see what happens to the background. Gosh, without the blades, with both of them engaged, with only one, and creating, working on creating a texture with the blades. Here's with the blades engaged on both sides. Ferns, I think that it's probably on both sides, but every subject does something different. Here's, you think, well, handheld, multiple exposure, I shoot Nikon, and so I can shoot 10 frames in camera and get the result. In this case, the only lens I had, it wasn't going to be my first choice, but that's all I brought into the field. So it was this lily. And what I did, this is cropped. I didn't shoot it square. I shot it rectangle and cropped to square. But I just put my autofocus point on the center and I rotated around. And when I did this is 1, 2, 3, 4, probably five frames. and it was closing time, so I needed to get out. The next time I went back to the gardens, I had a different lens on and I did 10. But you can do anything that you can do with a quote normal lens, you can do with any of the Lensbabies, just a little bit differently. If you put your focus point in the center or anywhere else in the frame and rotate off of that focus point, you can do any of those things. The Lensbaby Omni Creative Filter System. Here's just some sample images of what is included. So you've got crystals that give you different shapes and patterns, films that are clear, films that have textures on them, and then in the top, I'm left-right challenged, so excuse me for trying to think here. I should know my right. Anyway, up here, you can put these, any lens, you can use this filter system on any lens. So these, when you put them in front of your lens and move them around, it offers a wide range of different effects. You can use the adapter rings that come with it. And so they have metal, they attach with magnets, and so then it'll maybe a little bit easier because if you're using it on a Lensbaby, you're not autofocusing. So you've got to, if you're holding it by hand, it's hard to manually focus, move closer and back and forth, and move the filters where you want them. So I learned that lesson, but you also, when you're learning those lessons, you just figure it out. So I will confess that the Omni system rode around in my car for a long time, and then it rode around so long because when I first tried them, I was not good at getting an effect at all, so I just quit. Which, you know, we do that, and then I'm not a total quitter, so I said, okay, I'm going to try again. And so this is the Omni Neon that you may or may not have seen advertised. I don't know if they still have them, but I was a beta tester for the Omni Neon, and I'm going, oh no, I'm not even good at the Omni. And then you give me this, and I've got to test it and try it. Well, what I've learned is that, certain subjects work very well for this. It's just this neon little stick with holes in it. Let me see. Like these two here, crescent shapes and whatnot, but they were neon pink and yellow and green. And so that's henbit. And what I had to do was find an opening in one of the holes so that I could get some of the subject in focus, and the rest of it created that cool background. This is with the green, and again, I'm finding an opening in a hole. So if you're using any of the Omnis where there's an opening and you want something sharp, that's what you need to do. You can still shoot through and get an effect, but you've got to figure out what you want sharp and what not. This was with one of those films, and it's a great way, actually, if you've got dead space or a space that has distractions, you can use it to fill in and create different effects. This is actually, I call it the mirror paddle. It's reflective. And so I've got a dried plant that I held the mirror paddle in front and kept shooting to get this mirror image here. Same thing with this dry leaf that hasn't fallen because it hasn't been pushed out off the tree. And so I think the mirror paddle is probably among my favorites in the Omni, just because it's a little bit easier for me to use. But the colored films can be really cool, because here I am trying to, exercise my creativity with the films. And then this little kid comes down the trail. Well, you know how you have an idea of an image and then somebody photobombs you? Well, thankfully it was a little kid, and I used the film to kind of create kind of a vintage look. And so I think it worked. So I will play with those more, but they take work. In terms of just giving you some ideas, one of my philosophies is stay longer, see more. And I have a tendency to see things beyond what is there. So in flowers and all kinds of other plants, I see hooded women with capes and long dresses. And this is in a columbine. But the longer we stay with the subject, the longer we work with a lens or an optic or a tool that we haven't used that's a little uncomfortable, the more we see. And Lensbaby definitely pushes me in the stay longer phase, because I really connect with what I see through the viewfinder. This is adding a texture to that other frame. Here's another hooded woman, for example, with the Lensbaby. Oh gosh, I think the 56, right? I didn't label everything, but look at what happens to the background. Just super cool. I think this is probably one of the suites, because, I've got all that really wonderful, all those wonderful bubbles, and just a small thing of the tip of a calla lily sharp, and then just created fireworks in low light, just sort of celebrating color with spent dahlias. Erin Hansen, I love this quote, says there is freedom waiting for you on the breezes of the sky. And you ask, what if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? And I think that what if you fly is another phrase that if you put in your head, like, well, what if this doesn't work? Well, what if it does? What if you learn something by playing? More power to you for staying with it. So I hope you have a better understanding, more of an understanding of what Lensbaby is about, some tips on how to use them if you have them. Feel free to connect with me. If you have questions, you can shoot me an email. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. And because I'm a trailblazer, you can use my code Davidson if you want to screenshot this. You typically will save 10% on any order. The only time you won't is if it's a new product, then the code will not work. But if you use either of these two links, then I get credit. And because it's an affiliate link, I get a little bit of bonus compensation for the sale. But use it, don't use it. Take advantage of me in terms of if you've got a Lensbaby and you're trying to figure out, well, I've tried it and it's not working, shoot me an email, shoot me an image, what you did, what troubles you're having, and I will do my very best to help you. And if I can't, I know lots of other Lensbaby users that maybe use something that I don't use as often, but it's usually a pretty simple fix. So I just thank you for inviting me. And if you have any questions, pop in and I will stop sharing my screen and answer any questions or just say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jamie. I cannot wait to get out and play.
So
I can hear me.
Do any of you have Lensbabies? Okay, so you've got the Composer and what optic?
I have the Edge 50.
Oh.
And exactly, it's so funny, Jamie, because exactly like you said, I use it really for architecture and people.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have found that that's what a lot of people use it for. But it's like anything. We all have our favorite lenses and favorite subjects. And when we plug in with whatever tool we're using, it's like, yeah, this is what I need, But yeah, the Edge is not, it doesn't speak to me in the same way as the Velvets or the Suites. But again, I've got to pull out the edges, and you saw that I exercised a little bit of practice there. And so it's probably not one that I would have on my camera all the time, but I would stick it in my bag because they're so small. You can have 3 optics and switch them out. Anyone else?
I have the Trio and then I have the optic swap. I think mine is a 35 suite or a 50 suite.
Okay. Yeah, and they're, they're great. But the way I see the world is add a macro filter, because that's you can see what I've shared, that's where I go, and that's the macro and the close-up is my Calgon. So I'm going to things that make me feel like I'm taken away. But yeah, the 35 suite 35 and 50, you can use them in all different ways. So yeah, it'll be fun to see what people do with their Lensbabies.
With the Trio, I haven't found a solid way to add a macro extension to it. I think because of where the lens sits, right? It's not right in the center. There's like a weird, like you're seeing part of the optic on one side, but not the other.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't have the Trio. It just didn't ever appeal to me, but I know people who do have it. And one of the things I can tell you about the Trio is that some of them are using kind of not this one, that one, or that one, but kind of turning it kind of in between 2 optics. So you can try that and see what happens. Yeah.
I have 3 new lenses to play with in one.
I know.
Awesome.
I know. I haven't seen the effect, but they've told me, yeah, I use it in between I don't know what is on the trio, the velvet, sweet, and
Sweet and the twist. That's why I got it.
okay, yeah. So, you know, it's worth playing with and trying that in between. I'm trying to think, you could probably, so all of the optics, aside from the trio, are 46 millimeters, right? And years ago, Lensbaby had stuff for the phone, and it was a much smaller close-up filter. You might try to see if you can find, I don't know, it might be 20 something millimeters or whatever. If I can find out what that is, because I've got those old filters, it might be that same size, and just shoot me an email to remind me to do that, and maybe I can figure out what size the filter is, and what the heck, why not try it? The other thing is, if you've got a larger macro filter, just hold it in front and see what happens. Because you might see part of the optic, but you may not see, it may not show up right in your image.
Right. So I was using the extenders in the back, but I do have the squeezy one that you had mentioned,
Yeah,
the
the
super
spark.
simple one. That might work. I might have to hold too many things, but
Yeah, I know. It's
worth
easier to have
trying.
it's easier to have filters that fit, but I have been in the field and not had, like my step up ring, because I walked around Chanticleer Gardens in Pennsylvania, and I said, okay, I'm gonna use the Velvet 85. It's the only thing I'm walking around with. And I had my 500D, which is 77 millimeters, and the 85 is like 72 or 67. And I'm like, ramp, I just held it against it and it worked. So you might try that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, and Eric had to leave early, but he did want to share that they already got back to him. He inquired about changing the Olympus mount to Canon. Already got back to him, charge him $40, and they're going to swap it out.
Perfect.
Boom, Lensbaby.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you never know unless you ask. And so that's good for me to know that, contact them and they may be able to help you. And usually they do. So $40 is cheaper than a new composer.
Right? Sweet.
And whatever optic he has fits in all of them. So awesome. Super duper.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, this was awesome. I'm very inspired. I'm thinking a few people have left already, so I'll send an email to see if anyone is interested in our Lensbaby get together on the 30th. Everybody, Friday the 30th. And thanks again for your time, Jamie. This was awesome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie and
you.
Jamie.
A great experimentation with your Lensbabies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye.